just found out that not only was Jason Isaacs singing that song, he was playing the sax. These multi-talented people. It's like that Roxy Key. Not only does she write belting thrillers, she makes these Christmas cards. I can't even think of anything to say. This is my job. Anyway, so that was our little bit sales pitch for Bay Tales. Just going to remind you, discounted membership until the 31st of December. And if you register before the 31st of December, you get entered into win a lunch with the lovely Anne Cleves. So just, bear that in mind. Lovely Christmas gift. Anyway, let's get your drums out there, folks, please. Not a euphemism. Okay. Who is next? I'll get the blooming paper. It is one of our Bay Tales short story judges, Derek Farrell. Derek is the author of 5 Danny Bird mysteries: Death of a Diva, Death of a Nobody, Death of a Devil, Death of an Angel, and the novella Death of a Sinner. I'm seeing a pattern. They were all published by Fahrenheit Press. The 6th in the series, I don't actually know what that's called, maybe Derek will be able to tell us, will be published in early 2021. The books have been described by Neil Broadfoot as having heart, humour and enough twists to give you whiplash, by Chris McCrudden as like MC beaten on MDMA, you can't get a better quote than that, and by no less than an expert, Monty Python's Eric Idle, as quite fun. Ooh! Derek is married and lives with his husband in West Sussex. Christmas is his favourite holiday and he's overjoyed to be on the bill tonight. So huge round of applause, everybody, for Derek Farrell.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. I don't really have much else to say. I'm going to go straight into it. This has been a joy. These whole Virtual Noir at the Bar all year have been an absolute joy and a lifesaver. So thanks to Vic and Simon and everyone involved. I want to read 2 things tonight. They're both short. The first one is from Death of an Angel, which was the last Danny Bird full-length novel. And then the second one, which I'll read in a few minutes, is the prologue from Death at Duke's Holt, which is the next Danny Bird novel. And in Death of an Angel, Danny and Kaz are involved in investigating a suspicious death, which you're going to find out about in a moment. And the investigation leads them into discovering hidden secrets, greed, corruption, and property fraud. So I'll start with the prologue. Bastards, Eddie muttered to himself, shrinking deeper into his coat as a sudden gust of wind swept across the deserted and dilapidated square. He turned back to the squat shape of the goose-green arms, the sound of laughter and the tinny jukebox audible even at this distance, and contemplated yelling the epithet at the pub, before realising that it would probably go unheard by the barman in question. Besides, he figured, if heard by others, it would simply support the bastard suggestion that he, Eddie, was a mental case. What did that jumped-up little shitbag know anyway? What right did he have to pass comments like that? I'm not mental, Eddie muttered to himself, wondering as he did so whether saying it aloud had been overheard, whether the sight of him, a slight man burrowed down into an overcoat 2 sizes too big, talking to himself would, in itself, constitute crazy behaviour. He looked around the community square. It was gone 10 o'clock and the place was deserted. A corner shop, long shuttered for the night. A chip shop that sold some of the most questionable code around, and 4 derelict units, their shutters even more densely covered in graffiti and filth than the active shops. His eyes strayed over the wooden park benches, little more than dangerous sticks pointing sharply up towards the scudding clouds, the local kids having long since ripped the wooden slats away just because they could, and past the waste bins, ruined and scorched by fires, and useless as the crisp packets, newspapers, and detritus blowing freely around the square attested. There was supposed to be more, he muttered to himself, as another gust, straight from the Baltic he figured, swept across the square and caught at him, making his eyes water. Eddie had only wanted another drink, but then some stupid kid had made that comment about his hearing the voices and laughed at him, and he'd gotten upset. He knew he was supposed to stay calm, but he shouted at the little bastard, telling him that he wasn't mental. "I'm sick," he said, and the little fucker had laughed in his face. "Sick of the head, Grandad," he jeered back, which was when Eddie had tried to swing for him, and the barman, despite having watched the entire exchange with a smirk, stepped in, said, "You've had enough, Eddie," and kicked him out. "I take my medicine," Eddie muttered to himself. "I've got a right to be there. I've got a right," he repeated louder, and caught himself just in time and stifled the shout that had been bubbling up, though he failed to calm the anger that washed, mixed with embarrassment and shame, over him. "I'm not mental," he muttered again, seeming to sink even further into his coat as he crossed the deserted square. "I'm just not well. I'm getting better, and I take my medicine. I do," he stated emphatically, nodding his head affirmatively. But he knew he shouldn't have been drinking. His doctor had told him every time, "1 or 2 won't kill you, Eddie, but even a couple of small ones will interfere with the medicine. They'll do you no favours. It's best you try to leave the booze, yeah? Have a Diet Coke, something like that, yeah?" She always finished her sentences with that "yeah," as though she were uncertain if he'd heard or understood her. But he'd heard, and he understood. Still, he'd just wanted a couple of drinks, not even a couple of drinks, to be honest, a bit of company. He'd been sat in that flat all afternoon listening to that bastard banging on next door for ages, then listening to Kathy's telly when she got home. She always put it on loud, and he didn't usually mind it. Kathy was a nice lady, and at least there was no arguing tonight. But the bastard who'd been banging on her door all afternoon, shouting through her letterbox, had unsettled him, and he'd wanted to be amongst people who played a bit of dominoes, chatted, laughed a little. Just company. He passed the alcove on the corner of his street. At one stage, there'd always be young couples snuggling in it, canoodling. The word made him smile. He remembered his grandmother saying it and remembered thinking it sounded like some sort of outward-bound hobby, like canoeing mixed with doodling. But there was a railing around the alcove now, the result of the drug dealers who at one point had annexed the space. Because of the time of year, some local church had put a nativity scene behind the railing, and the vandals had already had a go at it, attempting to nick the plaster sculpture of the Virgin and, finding that it was chained solidly to the ground, settling instead for smashing the head off it. A couple of forlorn cows stared up at a naked bulb that, Eddie was sure, had housed the triumphant angel last time he'd looked. The angel, he surmised, turning the corner, had clearly not been chained as solidly as the Virgin Mother. A flurry of something fell as he crossed the courtyard outside the flats. Snow, he thought at first, then, shivering deeply, he reconsidered. Sleet. Bastard sleet, he thought, cursing now that he was almost home, that he'd not thought to pop to the offie for a couple of cans. Afterwards, when he was asked why he'd looked up, Eddie really couldn't explain. He remembered no noise, saw no shadow, didn't even feel the hackneyed old hairs on the back of the neck routine, but for some reason he did stop just before he left the pathway, following the flickers of icy white sleet as they fell, then tracking his eyes upwards and, for a minute, stupidly imagining they weren't sleet, but feathers. Feathers falling from the outstretched wings of the angel that was hovering over him. Only, in the second it took him to look up and register the shape, it was no longer hovering, but descending. And in the moment it took his brain to acknowledge this fact, he realized that what he had taken for wings was actually a coat of some sort, flapping wildly in the breeze, as the woman, he realized in horror, not angel, fell, a strange keening coming from her, to earth. He closed his eyes, a moment too late. So that's the opening of Death of an Angel, available now from all good bookshops. Actually, it's not. It's available from Amazon and the publisher, but one day. And very quickly, if you will indulge me, I will jump into the prologue from the next one, which is the most Agatha Christie thing I've ever written. It's an English country mystery. It still features Danny, Kaz, and a cast of foul-mouthed denizens from a pub in South London, and I won't go into the reasons why they end up in an English country house at this, but it was one of the most fun things ever to write. The prologue is short, I'll just kick it off. She's running around the room in a panic as the people on the other side of the door hammer relentlessly. The sideboard has been ransacked. Piles of napkins and tablecloths are scattered all over the floor. Most of the antique dining chairs are toppled on their sides, the seat cushions discarded haphazardly. The ornamental fireguard is lying on the same Persian carpet where, a few feet away, a man is sprawled on his front. The back of his head has a deep, dark hole in it, and glistening blood is spreading down over his collar and shoulder to pool around his head. She's stopped now and is standing over him, a small dark pistol in her hand. Her eyes turn to me and she reaches out, the gun pointing directly at me for a moment before she stares at it as though seeing it for the first time ever, and drops it. I can't find it, she says, panic mixed with despair clear in her voice. I've looked everywhere and I can't find it. Sunlight, thin and golden, catches the blood, still crawling slowly across the floor. Help me, she locks eyes with me. You have to help me find it. Find what, I ask, as the pounding on the opposite side of the door increases. The book, his black book. Without it, I'll never find her. She steps back, noticing for the first time that in her panic to search the corpse, she's gotten his blood on her hands. She looks at me, accusation clear in her eyes. He must have hidden it. He must have realized that you'd come to find him and hidden it. She stares at her blood-soaked hands, her whole body slumping, as though every last drop of hope is draining away, and then wrenches her eyes away from the gore to look straight at me. Oh God, Danny, what have you done? And then, with an ear-splitting crack and a splintering of wood, the door bursts open. And that's me. Thank you, and Merry Christmas to everybody.
Thank you very much for that, Derek. You've got 2 nominations for Quote of the Week so far, so don't forget to drop those in the chat. I have to apologise before I pull the next name out of the lovely hat. Some of you have had a weird email saying either registration or the event's been cancelled tonight. Clearly it hasn't. So apologies. I think there's been some gremlins must have been fed after midnight or watered or whatever you have to do. Anyway, moving on. I'm sorry if you got a dodgy email. Not Simon's fault. No, it's not. Honestly, it's not. I wouldn't say that if it really was. Drum roll. It is Gytha Lodge, who I believe was with Trevor at the last actual, no, I've forgotten what it's called in real life, Noir at the Bar, rather than virtual, in Newcastle in February. Gytha Lodge is the author of the Sunday Times best-selling Richard and Judy book club pick, She Lies in Wait. Woo! She loves crosswords and Christmas decorations and is known to get incredibly angry if there is no tea when there should be tea. Her third crime novel, Lie Beside Me, is out in February, a fact that she is incredibly excited about as it's her favourite book so far. So the lovely Gytha Lodge.
Thank you. So I'm going to read you, for the first time ever, the prologue of Lie Beside Me, which I've been honestly waiting to do for months because I'm very impatient and I'm really pleased to be doing it. It needs, fortunately, not a huge amount of introduction. So Louise wakes up the morning after a very heavy night with not a lot of memory about what's happened to her and makes a pretty horrible discovery. I felt cold. Cold in the way of night sweats, in the way of a slow waking to damp sheets that stuck to my skin. It was like that time when I thought I had lymphoma, but was, in fact, falling to pieces mentally instead. Do you remember that, Niall? I'd wake up every night, drenched and shivering, having sweated so much that it had soaked half the mattress. I fought waking up. I was too tired and too aware of the hangover that was about to descend. I was hating myself before I'd even opened my eyes. Well, hating drunk Louise anyway. That irresponsible, crappy version of myself who always seems to screw everything up just so she can have a good time. So I was half awake and hating it, And I thought that maybe if I shuffled back onto your side of the bed, then I'd find a dry area, and possibly even the duvet, and I'd be able to go back to sleep. But I couldn't seem to find the covers, so instead I squirmed further back to tuck into your body. It's always the warmest way to sleep, with you wrapped around me. But it didn't make me warmer. What had been dampness became shivering wetness. Something was soaking into my nightshirt. And I remember working out that it wasn't, in fact, a nightshirt at all. There were thin, hard straps digging into my shoulders, with a restrictive feeling of tight fabric. So, clothes. Drunk Louise had gone to sleep in her clothes. And that made me feel a little afraid of what else she might have done. I opened my eyes a slit, and I turned over. I saw you as a shadow at first, a reassuring, humped silhouette. The window behind you was lit with the orange glow of the street lamp down the road. It wasn't dawn yet. That light confused me. I've never known you go to sleep with the curtains open. Not once in 5 years. I remember I put a hand down to the mattress and then looked at it. I wasn't quite sure whether I could see a darker mark on my palm, but it occurred to me, quite suddenly, that the wetness might be blood. It didn't shock me yet, not even when I saw a spread of it between us. It was a dark circle that stretched almost as far as the pillows and down to my knees. And then I felt a creeping understanding, a realization that there were none of the normal sounds of sleep coming from you. No breath, no familiar squeak high up in your nose, no gurgling stomach, which always seems to feature in the early hours. I touched you on the shoulder. For some stupid reason, I whispered at you instead of speaking properly. Niall. Niall. Like it was possible to check you were okay without actually waking you up. There were two things that hit me then, and I don't know which one came first. I can't quite remember either one being clear before the other. First thing was that you were cold. Colder than the sheets. Colder than the feeling of my dress on my skin. A coldness that made your skin feel alien. And the second thing was stranger. Was realizing that you were strange. Your silhouette was too big. It was wider at the shoulder than you are. Perhaps thinner at the waist. By the time I turned the light on and I saw the bleach white face of a stranger looking back at me, I already knew it wasn't you. It wasn't you. Thank you very much. So that was a little extract from Lie Beside Me, which hits shops in February. But if you would like to pre-order, I would be absolutely delighted. And Merry Christmas, everybody.
Thank you so much. And hopefully we'll get you back in Newcastle one of these days.
Oh, I love it.
Fingers crossed. Okay, who's next? It is Emma Christie, who has been waiting so long to read this because we couldn't fit her in our summer run. Jeez, I've only had one cocktail. Anyway, let's move on. Emma Christie lives in Barcelona but was born and raised in Cumnock, an Ayrshire coal mining town. After studying literature and medieval history at Aberdeen University, she spent 5 years working as a news reporter with one of the UK's top-selling regional daily newspaper, the Press and Journal. Throughout her journalism career, she secretly wanted to be every author she ever interviewed. The Silent Daughter is Emma's debut novel. She's currently working on her second book, which is due to be released in autumn 2021. So the ever patient and lovely Emma Christie.
There we go, thank you very much. Absolutely delighted to be here with you as well. I did used to live in Newcastle as well, so I do have a connection. That's where I trained to be a news reporter. But I'll tell you about that another time. So I'm going to read from The Silent Daughter. Now there's two points of view in this book. There's the main narrative, which is from the point of view of a news reporter called Chris Morrison. And the other point of view is a sinister voice, and we don't know who that is. So I'm going to read the beginning of the book. So we have a little prologue from the sinister voice, and then the first chapter. I killed Ruth Morrison. Do I feel guilty? Yes. Do I regret it? No. Would I do the same again? Yes, but sooner. Chris Morrison held his wife as close as tubes and wires allowed. The worst reaction was no reaction at all. Not a flinch, not a sound. The metal bars at the side of the bed dug into his legs when he tried to lean in closer. He wished for home and for no space between them. Her mouth was hanging open under the plastic mask, dried saliva like mould on her tongue. He flushed, felt an intense embarrassment for the woman in his arms. Beauty had left every part of her. Even that mouth that perfectly fitted his, silenced now by bad luck or bad timing, some force stronger than she was. The word accident hadn't registered at first. He'd been up north for a weekend's winter hiking when he'd answered the call, heard a stranger with an Eastern European accent saying his wife's name in a way he'd never heard it pronounced before. Then he'd heard the words fall, head, and coma. Had been advised to go to Edinburgh Royal Infirmary as soon as possible. An officer would meet him there. 10 hours later, he was still there, holding a lump under starched white sheets that police and doctors referred to as your wife. It was so bloody impersonal. Her name is Maria. If it had been him in the hospital bed, Maria would tell him to focus on all the parts of his body that were healthy. You should be grateful that's the only thing wrong with you, she'd say. I know, love, I know. But what if there are no healthy parts left? What did you focus on then? He looked at Maria, a bruised, bloated version of herself, her breath and blood trapped in plastic tubes. Maria moving only on the inside. The fight of bloody, pulsating organs neatly packaged into polite beeps and jagged little lines on a screen. And all of this because she went for a run. It was incomprehensible to think he could lose his wife because she'd missed a step or tripped on her laces or slipped on a chip wrapper dumped by a student. Was that really all that had happened here? Maria had just fallen. He struggled to believe it. When he'd pushed the police for more information, he'd been fobbed off, told to be patient, and all the doctors offered were the same phrases he'd written 1,000 times as a news reporter. Critical condition, potentially life-changing injuries, some chance of a full recovery. All of them utterly meaningless and impossible to measure. But it was the night nurse's words that had stung the most. She'd tucked in the corner of Maria's sheets, then squeezed Christie's hand so tightly that his wedding ring had left a mark on his middle finger. If I were you, she'd said, I'd start phoning the family. He didn't need to ask why. The call to Mikey had been quick, though not painless. He was on his way. But it was never as straightforward with Ruth, was it? He'd tried her mobile dozens of times already. It went straight to voicemail without ringing, suggesting it was either switched off or that she didn't have any signal. He'd left messages that he hoped gave no suggestion of what was really wrong. Once she called back, he'd explain, assure her she shouldn't feel so guilty for being so far away. Anyway, miles meant nothing, would disappear with a flight. The distance between them would not. Chris heard the buzz of a fly, felt sick when it landed on his fingers. Could it sense Maria there? He'd used water and a paper hanky to clean blood off Maria's cheeks when he arrived. Tiny spots, missed by the nurses, but not by the man who'd woken up to that face every day for more than 3 decades. He'd washed his hands a dozen times afterwards, then scrutinised every line and crevice under the harsh bathroom light. He did not want pieces of his wife stuck under his fingernails, but Christ should always be there, on him and in him. He closed his eyes and pressed his nose and lips to her cheek, thinking of the tiny, soft hairs in the nape of her neck that he loved and she'd never seen. That part of her was for him only, hidden from the world under thick black curls that grew from Spanish roots. Tears came when he took a deep breath, sucked in the scent of her. There it was, the only part of Maria that remained unchanged. He took another long, deep breath, then leaned over the side of the bed to vomit. That's me. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Emma. It would appear that we have lots of former journalist trainees that all worked in Newcastle, including me, but that lasted 4 weeks. So we'll just not go there. Our final reader of this part is, it is Nell Pattison. The elves have spoken, Nell. Where is your information, Nell? Oh, so close, so close. There it is. Right. Nell Pattison is the author of the series featuring British Sign Language interpreter Paige Northwood. The first book in the series, The Silent House, was a USA Today bestseller. Woo! And the sequel, Silent Night, came out last month. Nell was one of the readers at our very first virtual Noir at the Bar on the 1st of April, and I'm absolutely delighted to have her back this evening. So everybody, huge round of applause for Nell Pattison.
Hello, thank you. So yes, this is Silent Night I'm reading from. And I've got to say the next one is The Silent Suspect, so I want to thank you, Emma, for stealing one of my potential titles. But it's all right, a few other people have done it too. Anyway, yes, so I'm reading from, this is the second book in the series. As Vic said, the main character is Paige Northwood. She's a British Sign Language interpreter. And so I'm going to read a bit of chapter 1. So you need a little bit of background because I'm kind of starting halfway through, as you do. So Paige, as I say, British Sign Language interpreter, seems to keep finding herself involved in murder investigations, as people do in crime novels. And so she's been called to Normanby Hall, which is a real place in North Lincolnshire. And she's been called there because there's a school that have stayed there overnight on a very snowy night, and they've woken up in the morning and one of the students has gone missing. The head teacher's gone out to look for him, and then the head teacher doesn't come back either. So Paige has been called there because it's a school for the deaf. Maybe I should have said that. And so the students are all deaf and a couple of the staff are deaf, and so they need an interpreter to help them take statements from the deaf members of the school who are there. So here we have a section with Sasha, who is a social worker who also works with the school, who is profoundly deaf herself, who's insisting on going and helping for the search. So Paige goes with her, accompanied by a PC. And any mention of Singh, he's our lovely detective who crops up in all of the novels so far. I'm not going to sign the signed bits, by the way. I'm just going to read them. I was asked about that. No, I'm not going to sign them. Singh led Sasha and me back outside, where he introduced us to a PC. Ryan, I'm adding you to the search party with Paige and Sasha here. Singh pulled a map out of his pocket and handed it over, indicating which part of the estate hadn't been covered yet. If in doubt, follow your own footprints back here again. The uniformed officer nodded and set off away from the cabin, taking us further from the hall and deeper into the woods. Before we turned a corner and lost sight of the cabin, I looked back. Someone was watching us from the window, but I couldn't see who it was. It's getting darker, I pointed out to Sasha. I think it's going to snow again. She shook her head. I told them we shouldn't have come with this forecast, but Steve was determined not to cancel. A bit of snow will make it all the more exciting, he said. She rolled her eyes. This is more than just a bit of snow, but he wouldn't listen, and he's the head, so has the final decision. Why did you come with them? I asked. They needed a woman, she replied with a wry smile. None of the female staff could come this weekend, or so they said, so Steve asked me. PC Ryan was walking slightly ahead of us and glanced back at us occasionally, but as he couldn't follow the conversation, he carried on trudging through the snow in silence. Sasha and I stopped signing for some time as we looked around us, searching for any sign of Leon or Steve as we went. The trees along the side of the path were thinning out, and the expanse of virgin snow ahead of us was widening. We'll go as far as that stand of trees there, PC Ryan told me, then loop back around. According to the map, we're getting closer to where the southern end of the estate meets the road, so we'll go that way to check for potential entrances or exits. I signed this for Sasha and she nodded. How do we know he's even in the park? We don't, the PC replied with a shrug, but we still have to look. As we walked, I wondered why this particular part of the park was so open. The area in front of us was completely clear of trees, and it was an almost perfect square. It was only when I spotted a low, snow-covered building on the far side that I realised where we were. Is this the cricket club? I asked Ryan, and he frowned, pulling out the map. Yes, it must be, he said, his tone of voice not filling me with confidence. I hoped we were going to be able to find our way back to the cabin. In which case, we're closer to the road than you thought, I pointed out, but he didn't say anything. We should check the pavilion, he said. It'd be an ideal place to shelter. I signed our conversation for Sasha and she nodded. That's a good idea. If he's still in the park, it'd be a good place to hide. Nobody's going to be playing on this pitch for a little while. The three of us crossed the pitch and approached the small building. Look, I said, pointing to where a pane of glass had been broken. PC Ryan put out an arm. Don't come any closer, he said. There might be evidence and we don't want to compromise it. There's less snow around the door, as if it was pushed open from the inside, I pointed out, and Ryan nodded, already on his radio. He explained where we were and what we'd found, so we then had to wait for the detectives to come and find us. Sasha kept shifting from foot to foot and trying to peer through the window, anxious to see if Leon was inside. After a few minutes had passed, I felt something soft brush my cheek and looked up. It's snowing again, I said, as more fat flakes drifted down. Just what we need, Ryan muttered. Come on, let's check round the back, I signed to Sasha, who'd been pacing restlessly. She nodded her agreement and followed me. Leaving Ryan waiting for Forrest, we stomped through the snow and looped round behind the pavilion. I feel responsible, she told me. I should have realised something was wrong. Don't say that, I replied, trying to reassure her. Nobody knows what happened yet. I know, but... She stopped and paused. What's that? What? That over there. I followed where she was pointing and squinted into the trees. As I moved closer, I spotted what looked like a pile of material at the base of one of the trees, half covered in snow. I don't know. Stay here, I'll have a look, I said, pushing my way through the frozen undergrowth. Sasha shook her head and followed me, and we approached together. As we got closer, we saw it wasn't a pile of material, but a person. Oh God, is he okay? I asked as we got closer to the man on the ground. He was lying on one side with his back to us. I could see a head of well-styled grey hair, some high-quality outdoors clothing and an expensive pair of walking shoes, one of which had come off and was lying about a metre away. A thin layer of snow covered him, setting off alarm bells in my head. Sasha reached out to shake him, and the man's head lolled in a sickening way. As his head tipped to the side, I saw a huge gash on the side of his neck and a vibrant splash of red on the snow to the side of him, spilling out from the wound. It was clear he was dead. I retched and took a step back. My head was spinning. Who is it? I asked, though I was sure I already knew the answer. Steve Wilkinson, Sasha replied, her face pale. The head teacher. And that's that. If you're an ebook reader, it's 99p at the moment. Just thought I'd point that out, you know. And if you want a signed copy, the only place you can get it is from the Rabbit Hole Bookshop in Brig. You can contact them on Twitter or Instagram. It's the only place in the world that has signed copies right now, until I can travel further. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Alex Hawley would like to know, what were the challenges in writing a sign language interpreter character?
Challenges are, well, not being too free with the role of a sign language interpreter, as I know quite a few and they would kill me. Not literally, hopefully. I don't want to interview one of my own books. No, it's to do with writing the BSL, really, is the difficult bit. So it's all written in italics to distinguish it from speech. I've had I think one review saying, oh, it's not written authentically, but because BSL doesn't follow English word order, it has its own grammatical structure, so it is translated into English because the people reading it are reading in English, the same as if I was writing a translation from German, I would use English grammar and word order. So yeah, that's the main challenge is just remembering to that the characters are deaf, really, and not writing any sounds and things that they might have picked up, which, even though I have a hearing loss myself, you know, I use hearing aids and I can hear most things, and you know, so it's not something that I've really truly experienced myself. So that's probably the main challenge.
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining us again.
Sure.
Again, folks, Silent Night is 99p on e-reader at the moment, on Kindle at least. We're going to go to a break, and Simon has asked me to mention that this might seem a bit morose, but it's just a little thank you from us, from probably all of the key workers and emergency service workers, for staying in this year and for being with us and choosing to be with us and choosing to stay in when lots of people weren't. So we'll see you in 5 minutes. Thank you.
An invite to a wedding that no one can attend, a poster for a show that never happened, 2 tickets for a holiday I can no longer spend, gift for Mother's Day I won't be wrapping. This is all I'm left with in a world that's been shut down. I wanna come and see him home, but I fear that thing that I might bring in, so I'm sending you this message with a heavy heart to say, I miss you, but I can't be there today. I love you, and that's why I'm gonna stay away. Has been postponed, all plans put on hold, prospects fade and expectations shatter, but all through these uncertain days I've come to understand those few precious things that truly matter. Mama, you've been on my mind as the world has slipped away. Promise me you'll do the things that must be done in the days to come. I don't know when I'll get the chance to hug you, so I wanna say I miss you, but I can't be there today. I love you, and that's why I'm gonna stay away. and that's why I'm gonna stay.